I got into adventure really as a child. I grew up watching Jacques Cousteau movies and reading adventure books, studying the great mountaineers, and just being enthralled at the idea of being challenged by an endeavour. The early part of my life, I probably spent 10 years climbing, sailing, diving, doing all sorts of things around the mountains or the ocean. You know, that's been a very profound driver of who I've become as an adult. I would love, as many people as possible to have the same sort of opportunities. And the machines we're building are really just with that in mind. The inspiration behind Arksen goes back 20 years roughly.
Here we are.
I was very lucky to do a trip sailing from Australia all the way up to Alaska on a sailing boat. We were one of the first boats, if not the first Western boats to go into Kamchatka.
It's 11:30. We're in the La Perouse Strait at the moment. We came out from Wakanai about 5 hours ago.
I was a climber, and so I'd spent many years climbing and been inspired by, Doug Scott and Stephen Venables and Chris Bonington and these sort of amazing mountaineers. I was given the opportunity to sort of climb almost every mountain between Australia and Alaska, and so it was a sort of climbing, sailing trip. If you're given the opportunity to do those things, they're sort of once in a lifetime. So I jumped at the chance, and myself and my best friend and a couple of others took this boat on, 6,500 mile voyage, climbed maybe 30 mountains along the way. And it was an extraordinary trip. And we met wonderful people, and we went skiing and climbing and obviously a lot of sailing. That trip really formed a lot of my thinking around adventure and the things I'd like to do later in life as well. I had a big professional career and found great solace enjoying going off on adventures. And as my family grew up, went off on adventures with them. And so Arksen was really about trying to sort of create the environment that would enable great adventures to happen. And that's really been the inspiration and the starting point for it.
I've always been drawn to the sea since I was a child. Whether it was being on it, in it, under it, didn't matter. To look at the adventures I've undertaken over the years, it's quite interesting to start with. I've spent about 2.5% of my life alone at sea in small boats. And that goes back to that childhood obsession with the water. Ever since I was 13 years old, I wanted to row across the Atlantic. I read this story about a man called Peter Bird who was tragically lost trying to row the Pacific, which might seem an odd source of inspiration. From there, I found out about the sport of ocean rowing, and I was captivated by that. That led me to row the Atlantic when I was 23, and that was successful. Got a few world records off the back of that. And that was really a slippery slope into other adventures, from kayaking from Greenland to Scotland, trying to row around the world. I just was always drawn to the ocean, to the sea, to the rivers, to lakes. It's a visceral sort of need to want to be in that other element where we can just get away. It's wild, it's untamed, and to me it's really exciting. It's alluring, and for me there's no other element that gives you all those things.
The key message for Arksen is really trying to find the child within us all. It's trying to find the innocence that we had and trying to encourage us to set off on these wonderful adventures, to break beyond the bounds of what we know in our daily lives, and to dare to dream and to look beyond the horizon and go, well, I could go over there.